All right. Then let's start. I want to just like start with like a basic question. Josephine, what is pink totalitarianism? The question, what is pink totalitarianism, is a complicated question, because pink totalitarianism is not just one thing. Pink totalitarianism is a form of society that we envision, but it's as of yet unmapped, as it were. You know, like it's not a solid thing. So the question, in a way, cannot be answered in this way. But maybe I'll just answer another question, which is the more important and interesting question, which is that like pink totalitarianism has been scathed by its enemies for its radical practices. So we have suggested terrorist attacks on the libidinal infrastructure of capitalistic societies, such as poisoning the waters with testosterone blockers, sabotaging couple relationships, replacing all sexual intercourse with anal to dildo intercourse, and seizing the production sites of hormonal and gendered existence, such as the production sites of hormones, but also of like Hollywood and the military, et cetera, et cetera. And we are not shy of the use of violence in this project. So in the widely acclaimed and rightfully acclaimed text Full Bureaucracy Now, which was published in eFlex a while ago, we, for example, suggest that couples, like the couple form itself, should be wildly sabotaged by means of, for example, a reproductive strike. So the idea here is that the dysfunctional form of the two-person relationship is inherently toxic and should stop. Partially because it blocks other kinds of social relations that could exist between friendship and romantic relationships. So it seems to us that that social relations within neoliberal societies and patriarchal societies are very much arranged around the question, do you fuck or do you not fuck? Where the question, if the question is answered with yes, you fuck, then you're probably on some kind of like track of like relationship, like romantic relationship thing. And if you don't, you're like probably it's like some kind of like friendship. And we think that this is a gross restriction of the capacity of human flourishing, which is why we think the couple form must die. So how do we kill the couple form? Well, the couple form, as you all know, is inherently dysfunctional and can only exist by means of external assistance. So every couple always requires the assistance of maintaining forces from the outside, such as like friends, couple therapists, parents, alcohol, drug abuse, Netflix addictions, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea is that like the couple form can only exist and persist because it is constantly propped up, because it's constantly artificially maintained by forces outside of the couple form. So if that didn't exist, if these reproductive activities towards the couple, the particular couple, did not exist, then the couple form would just collapse, as it were. And the easiest way to do it is just not counsel each other on relationship issues anymore. Now that's an intense demand, because the couple form, of course, has a religious status within the neoliberal economy that we live in. So like the idea here is that that love is a kind of religion, and the gospel of that religion is the conversation about, you know, love relationships, problems in love relationships. Is this a relationship? Is this not a relationship? It can like happen according to, or like in the example of artistic products, like, you know, movies and stuff like that. Or it can happen within the context of individual counseling. But it seems to us that a good portion of the way in which people relate to each other is in some way this, like the discourse on love. And just as in the 19th century, a radical critique of religion as institutionalized religion, Christianity, etc., was necessary. Today, what we need is a radical critique of love and an exit from love as an organizing principle of social relations, in order to like free up time and free up space and free up imaginary force to be otherwise in a very general way. Thank you. We have already like seen a little bit of the gist, maybe, of how this is being conducted. You already like just dismissed my question because you thought it's a bad question, and that's fair. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about why you think that pink totalitarianism, whatever it is necessary, and what justifies the violence that you advocate for. So you said that the means of pink totalitarian intervention should be terrorist actions, such as poisoning the water with testosterone blockers and sabotaging the couple form in a very concrete way, right? Like these are not theoretical enterprises. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what that looks like concretely on the one hand, and on the other hand, why it is necessary. Yes, thank you for the question. I sure can. First of all, this is necessary because the couple form is one of the most palpable ideological means to keep people within a libidinal economy that is dominated by neoliberal mechanisms. Now, under neoliberal capitalism, I understand the universalization of the logic of property. Now, what is property? So, like, this is my coffee. This is my cup of coffee. And what that means is that I can exempt everybody else from the usage of this cup of coffee. So I can say, don't use it. In a way, this is a manifestation of negative freedom. So freedom as the absence of external interference. So absence of external interference, you denying me my coffee, is what we call negative freedom. And the manifestation of that in an object is what we call property. Okay, so what neoliberal capitalism is trying to do is to totalize, to universalize this logic of property. So in fact, the question cannot be totalitarianism, yes or no, which is an often heard confusion that people have when they hear pink totalitarianism, right? Like they think, oh my God, totalitarianism, that must mean gulags and fascist work camps and all of this stuff. But in fact, we are living in a totalitarian society, like in a totalitarian system. It's just that it's a totalitarianism of negative freedom, or a totalitarianism of property that tries to like replace all kinds of relations with property relations. And we could give many examples of that. However, this system of universalization of property inherently produces misery. Why does it inherently produce misery? Why can there be no happiness within neoliberal capitalism? Well, the reason is very simple. The reason is that neoliberal capitalism aims at the universalization of the property form because it wants to accumulate more capital. Now, as a matter of fact, happiness does not produce capital. Misery produces capital. Misery requires a remedy. Like every time you're sad, you need to do something about it. And if everything becomes property, then everything that you can do against being sad is going to be mediated through a kind of property. Meaning, you're sad about a breakup, you go to the bar, you drink, you spend money. Then you go home, then you have a headache, then you take painkillers and you spend money. And then after you've done that for a while, you go ahead and you look for a therapist and you spend money, etc., etc. So, as a matter of fact, neoliberal capitalism aiming to accumulate as much capital as possible has no interest in making you happy, because if you're happy, you're not consuming as much. Neoliberal capitalism has a systemic interest in keeping you just as unhappy, that you keep spending your money on the one hand, but you don't fall out of the process of the exploitation of your labor, meaning you don't stop working, you don't stop being exploited. So the order of neoliberal capitalism is such that you're just scraping by, like surfing the curb of collapse, which is why, like, if you find yourself in a constant crisis mode, or like a repeated crisis mode, this is not an accident. This is not you not having your shit together. What this just means is that neoliberal capitalism is working and is exploiting you. All right. So what I just tried to outline to you is that the order of neoliberal capitalism is such that you will be eternally unhappy. And that's not because people are greedy or stupid or something like that. That's just because that's what neoliberal capitalism is. It's an order of eternal unhappiness. All right. How do we get away from that? Well, we need to abolish neoliberal capitalism. But the single most ideological formation that keeps you in the system and keeps you from actually acting out against it is the capital form, is the promise that there can be happiness. There can be happiness if only you find the right person to live the good life with. Whatever else is happening, like love, like the discourse of love, the religion of love, functions as this safety zone, the safety zone within the ultimately exploitative logic of capitalism. All right, and that is why you cannot abolish capitalism, however much you tax the rich, without changing the libidinal economy, without changing the ideology of love, without abolishing the couple form as the principal mode of organization of this social formation. All right. Now, the question is now, why be violent about it? Why not just tell people, like I do tell you now? Like, I mean, can we not just convince everybody of the right and good thing? Well, the answer is no, and the reasons are two. One is that by experience, consciousness changes when the material conditions that somebody's living in changes. So the idea here is that I can convince you of many things, but you will probably not start acting until you're in a crisis and you have to act. All right, like in political activism, this is a very common experience. People don't engage in a renters union or a transgender community organizing group or in anti-racist activism or whatever have you until they suffer, right? Like when they are threatened with being kicked out of their apartment, that's when they seek refuge in the arms of the renters union, and then after that they might stay and might keep working there. Of course, there are exceptions. I'm not saying this is like a 100% true, but by experience, oftentimes this is the case. So if you want to like develop a mass movement and really change society, you cannot just go from person to person and try to like convince everybody individually. You have to change the material conditions. All right. Now, that's the first reason. The second reason is by changing these material conditions, you of course change the way in which these people live fundamentally, and that will be experienced as violence. So in a way, we could say the couple form is inherently toxic. That's the violence. Sabotaging couple form, trying to break up people's relationships is not a kind of violence. It's a liberating gift. It's a liberating act that is ultimately gonna help people. But footnote here, it is important to note that social hierarchies are real, and couple forms, even couple forms between strongly minoritized people, like black and brown people and trans people, queer people, can technically sometimes function as mutual support systems. So we should focus first on heterosexual, cisgender, white relationships, just as a footnote. So don't start fucking up the relationships of your friends, of your queer friends, of your friends of color too quickly. Focus on the focus on the white cis ancestors. Okay, whatever. So what I said was, this is going to be experienced as violence, but framing it as violence is the actual real violence. The real violence is that you take the drug for the medication. All right, that you like take the toxic, the inherently toxic couple relation, the inherently toxic adherence to the property form, and the promises of happiness through owning the right things and doing the right things, as a good thing, and that you like reserve, or like you settle down with like, you know, like a 2-room apartment, a 1-room apartment, a shitty job, and like 6 to 8 hours of work a day. But we shouldn't stop there. Like that this is, you know, that 12 euro minimum wage, or even 13 euro minimum wage, depending on which party you opt for, is even considered progress. That's the real violence. That's the real violence. Thank you so much. That explains a few things, but I'm still wondering. I have a few other questions, and one question that I have is, what is the role? I mean, when I read your proposal, your manifesto, maybe, then the police plays an important role here, and there's been lots of talk about the police in the last few years from many angles. So on the one hand, we have seen, especially in Germany, Nazi networks within police forces. There's a continuation between National Socialism and the German police. City centers, especially in large cities like Berlin and Hamburg, are increasingly policed. There has been a lot of talk about abolitionism, and a completely like new approach to the justice system, especially following the George Floyd protests last year. And I wanted to pick your brain on that a little bit. Like, can you tell me, what do you think about the police? So first of all, we need to understand what the police really is. So the police, I would say, it's not just some random social institution. All right, like the police is actually a symptom of the property form itself. As soon as you have property, you also have police. You cannot have, especially private property, without having the police. Why is that? Well, as a general principle, every invention produces its own accident. So as soon as you invent the car, you also invent the car accident. If you invent the airplane, you invent the airplane crash. If you invent the couple form, for example, like two-person relationships as an organizing principle of society, you also invent the breakup, you invent cheating, you invent toxic relationships, etc., etc. So there's never any kind of formation that cannot suffer accidents, that cannot suffer downfall, that cannot suffer going wrong, misfiring, however you want to call it. All right. Now, the property form as the manifestation of negative freedom, as a absence of external interference, as I just tried to point out, is no exception. So whenever I own something like a cup of coffee or an apartment or whatever else, that comes with the possibility of someone else owning it. And that comes with the possibility of that person taking it from me. So the good old slogan by anarchist socialist Proudhon, property is theft, is true literally, not in a metaphorical way, not just in a way that like all property was incepted by theft. This is also true, of course, that like what economists call original accumulation, namely the inception of capitalism in the early modern period, largely was based on colonialism, was based on the exploitation of especially racialized people, was premised on taking land, especially, and things and labor force from people against their will. And in that sense, on a material level, property is theft. But on a metaphysical level as well, property is theft, because you don't get property without theft, because every invention produces its own accident, and the accident of property is theft, or like one of them, constitutional accident is theft. Also because private property cannot be had without excluding other people from what you have. So there's a possibility for this other people taking what you have, and that means property comes with theft. But the institution of private property also requires you, or like asks you, to keep what you have, to hold on to what you have. That's the idea of private property, and the desire to keep what you have as a social formation, as a cultural invention, as an institution, is the police. That's what we call the police. The police is metaphysically necessary as long as we have private property in order to maintain the idea of private property in a society in the first place. All right, so you won't have police. No, you won't have a society without police that is still using private property. This is an important insight. So if you think that the police is a shit idea, which hopefully you do, then you should also think that we should get rid of private property. All right. So if you're against the police, you're against private property. You cannot have the one. You cannot have the one without the other. Consequentially, we need to also broaden the scope of what we think the police is. So it's not just like people in uniforms. I mean, it's been pointed out by Walter Benjamin and by Avital Ronell and by Jacques Derrida and by other people that the real force of the police is not necessarily when they're in front of you and you slow down in your car because you think that they'll catch you, or like you, by exception, observe a red traffic light on your bike because you think they'll pull you out. That's only one aspect of the police. The real drama of the police is their spectrality, is their ghostly existence, is their existence as something that could happen anytime, is their existence as like potentially breaking through your door at any moment and chastising you and correcting you and like telling you to do things. So you observe rules because there might be a police officer getting in your way, not because there actually necessarily already is a police officer getting in your way. All right. So the point of the police is, on the one hand, of course, the real police officers who beat up people and shoot people and form Nazi networks and all this stuff on the one hand. But on the other hand, the police is a system of subjectivation like becoming a person, of you thinking in your own head that you shouldn't do this or that because someone might come and call you out. And that also means that people become police officers towards each other. Philosophers, for example, are good and famous examples of what a police officer is. They keep telling you what to think and what not to think. Lock and Key, for example, are non-human manifestations of the idea of police. That the fact that like we have to protect our property from theft by way of locking our doors, closing our doors, keeping our stuff to ourselves, etc., etc. So some people confuse, as it were, the desire for truth, for good life, with becoming a police officer, with like constantly telling themselves and the others to do what's right and to judge them at all times. In the German context, I would say this terrible practice of watching Tatort, like this crime series that like is running on Saturday evenings. That's really an ideological machine that produces subjects that inherently rely on the idea of the police. So it teaches you, like crime novels and like crime series and all of this stuff, that teaches you how to think like a cop, right? Like you watch the series, like you watch the episode, and in your own mind, you try to like connect the dots and find out who done it. And that turns you into a cop, that like teaches you how to think like a cop. It also teaches you not to think like a communist. It also teaches you not to think regarding collectivity, sharing, hospitality, and all of these kinds of things. All right. So it spoils you. It's toxic. Watching stuff with police officers turns you into a police officer and like gets you further away from a revolutionary sentiment. Right. So one, police is a necessary result of the property form, especially private property. Two, police is not just people in uniforms. Police is a social relation of protection that you probably all engage in on some level, and it's very important to undo that habit of constantly policing one another. So abolitionism, which I am very much in favor of, cannot just mean to defund the police. Of course, we need to defund the police, but we also need to like defund the police officer in ourselves and the ways in which we police each other and protect our shit against one another. Right. That's my take on the police. Thank you so much. I already heard you say the term communism. So communism is very much out of fashion, and like nobody actually calls themselves a communist today so much. I was wondering if you could say a thing or two about the relationship between pink totalitarianism and communism as it is generally understood. Yes, I sure can. Thank you for the question. Well, in actually, in the Communist Manifesto, Marx says that oh no, stop this, like get out Marx, fuck Marx, who cares about Marx? I do think that the general question of politics today is still property, yes or no. And if you answer property, and especially private property, yes, then you're complicit with neoliberal totalitarianism. And if you answer private property, no, you're a communist on a very basic level. All right. So the question is just property, yes or no. If you answer no, you're a communist. If you answer yes, you're complicit. That's my very simple answer. Now, oftentimes, communism is conflated with Soviet communism of the 20th century. Now, Soviet communism of the 20th century was, believe it or not, an Enlightenment project. What I mean by that is that it was a top-down system where somebody thought out the right things and then other people would do it. In this way, communism, just like democracy or like any other system, has a metaphysical makes a metaphysical mistake. And I want to here emphasize that pink totalitarianism is misspelled, and it's not an accident. So if you look closely at the term totalitarianism as it is spelled in the annunciation of this talk, you will see that we spell totalitarianism with an E in the middle. Totalitarian, totalitarianism. So we are mounting an extra term into the term totalitarianism, which is aliter, which stands for other, different, broken, things like that. All right. So pink totalitarianism is not a top-down, we tell you what to do and you will follow kind of action. Totalitarianism is the manifestation or like the universalization, well, not the universalization, the extension maybe of difference. So the idea is not a unification as in the right-wing fantasy of potato sack communism, where everybody's just like wearing potato sacks and being miserable with like without private property, while like the top 5 guys just like own everything, which is the general picture of Soviet communism, potato sack communism. But instead, the maximization of difference. So pink totalitarianism as a kind of communism has nothing to do with Soviet communism. Soviet communism is a thing of the past. Wonderful, thank you so much. That is that clarifies a thing or two. I would probably now, I think we can open the floor maybe to questions, and I'll just keep intervening if I feel like that's a good idea. Is that all right? Do you think that's going to work out?